Okay, I am a bit apprehensive about this speech. It's the first time that I'm presenting this. I've been working on it for a while. Hopefully you will realize that, and also because of the quality of the speakers before me. I do want to present it anyway because everybody has a right to my opinion. And also, it's the best birthday present you could have given me. It just made me realize this morning that at 58, had I remained a pilot, this would be the moment of my retirement, or as I like to say, the moment of my social uselessness. So let's jump into this. I have tried to. You want me to? What? This here? Hello.
Yeah, it'll record better.
Okay, even better. Now that's my train of thought. That's okay. Let's just jump in. I have the purpose of this house of politics was for myself to structure my information, my arguments, my facts, because it used to be I just pile them in my brain like I did the dirty laundry at home, and then when I look for something I wouldn't find it. Now I can choose which floor I want to put it on, which room that I want to put it on, and which bookshelf in that room, or which bed, and then it's just like at home. I know where it should be, and sometimes I find it. But so I first give you an overview of the structure. We have on the base of the architecture, and then we look into the rooms. Maybe you want to construct your own house, and maybe you get some inspiration from the interior decorating in some of the rooms. So the foundation is the logic of action. I want to prove that civil society leads to peace and prosperity, while any type of conflict or any type of force leads to conflict and poverty, and so it goes up and up. Let's just jump into the different floors. Okay, logic of action. There are three ways of dealing with one another. Logically, there is either peaceful and voluntary. That's what we do in private dealings 90% of the time. Of course, in private dealings also there is also force, and that's where the defensive force kicks in. I can either do that personally, I can defend myself, self-defense, or the state can help me with police, judicial system, and military. The third way is the monopoly of the state. Only the state may initiate the use of force, and that's the so-called positive laws, while of these here are the negative laws, which is morally, of course, the opposite. Defensive forces, negative laws protecting life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. With this graph, we can develop a so-called yardstick of power that I propose. On the left-hand side, you have a society with no state monopoly. On the right-hand side, you have 1984, complete control. And and here is a concept that we often use as libertarians: the minimal state, where the state restricts itself to the protection of negative rights, as I mentioned, life, liberty, the pursuit of happiness. Now, Poland, of course, will be probably around here, 40% of the income being spent by the state, while let's say USSR was somewhere over here. Let's look at the logical wealth effects of these three ways of dealing with one another. When we deal voluntarily with one another, when we talk, trade, make contracts, we do that as long as we all parties expect a benefit, a personal subjective benefit. So those dealings always produce peace and prosperity. Down here we have the defensive force, requires some effort to defend yourself, but you do get some security, but there is definitely not much value produced down here. While as over here, it's clear that the person that needs to be forced wouldn't want to do it without force, so at least one involved party has a negative personal subjective valuation of the dealings. If we combine those two things, we can extend the yardstick of power to a yardstick of wealth with a predictive power that the less force, the more peace and prosperity, the more force, the more conflict and poverty. And if we look at a historic example, for example, the Industrial Revolution, we had pretty much a laissez-faire state, night watchman state, as they called it in Europe, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Once again, more or less, there was a bit more to the industry. Necessary but not sufficient, but still, it was clear what happened then. From 1800 on, we had an increase in average income that was just inconceivable before that moment in history. The other example is the 20th century, where we have the socialist experiment all over the world, and their results were clear and very clear. Whether it was 100 million, whether it was fewer or less, this is not even including the National Socialists. It's just a horrendous experience confirming poverty and conflict. You guys all know that, coming from Poland, of course. Let's jump into the economic sphere. I just want to show you the structure we can, upon which you can then fill in your own experiences. I propose there are three categories of economic actors. There is either the actors in the competitive market, like small business, cars, consumer products, electronics, restaurants, and so on. The private owners, consumer is king, like we experienced yesterday. Don't go to the places where you were not satisfied. While as in the middle, we have the regulated industries. That's whole branches of the economy, like agriculture, like financial sector, medical sector, and also military-industrial complex, and so on. You get the idea. On the right-hand side, you have the state firms like state education, public transport, public propaganda, police, military, and the judicial system. Now, these guys have different goals and different management and logically different outcomes, and this is what I want to prove, irrespective of the character or the intentions of the actors. For example, the goals over here is profit. Profit means benefit, greater cost, which means there is social wealth creation. Never forget, profit is ultimately the source of almost all of our progress. There needs to be social surplus for inventions and so on. So that's a very moral thing. Now, these guys have the profit motive, but in addition, they have some arbitrary political goals like consumer protection, redistribution goals, market failures, and over here you have the politicians. They can, even if they had the best intentions, they have no idea of whether their projects and their budgets are worth it. Is a kindergarten worth $2,000, $10,000? Is a hole through the mountains in Switzerland worth 15 billions? Why not build a pyramid in the city of Zurich for 10 billion? Why not? I mean, who is to say it's not worth it? So they can't help but to make mistakes. The management over here, of course, innovative, flexible, and over in the middle, it's management plus lobbying, all of the bad things, regulatory capture, moral hazard, too big to fail, all of these things that capitalism gets accused of has nothing to do with capitalism. It's the lobbying part of the mixed economy. And the bureaucrats, they're not even allowed to be inventive. They have laws, they have budgets, and they have to administrate the laws. If the law says you have to run a train every half an hour to anywhere, it doesn't matter whether there are passengers. The train and nothing will be invented, nothing will be changed. If you look at the streets, the trains, the school rooms, and you compare them to 50 or 100 years ago, nothing ever changes. Compare that to the free market solutions. So the logical conclusions are, over here we have declining prices or improving products. We have wealth creation, in one word, production in the middle. We have all the excesses and corruption. And on the right-hand side, we have plain old waste. And I'll show you one wealth destruction. This is an impressive, the consumer price index, 78 to 2013. You can see the public sector, the regulated sector, and consumption. We're not talking about 10, 20%. We're talking about a factor 3, 10, 6, or 10 that the government sectors are wasting the money. Huh? So this here, I really, because of the time restrictions, I really basically only can show you the structure of up here, personal life decisions. What are the topics and what are the consequences? There are two possible ways to run your life, and they're exclusive. You can either decide yourself, self-determination, which makes everybody equal, or else you have paternalism, which puts the politicians in the position of a parent. You do what I say, and I'll leave you alone, or else you get a fine or imprisoned. So there is nothing in between. What are the topics? For example, education, work restriction, pension plans. Politicians know better how I should run my life, right? Of course. I mean, if I look at the politicians, they're such wonderful people that I would not even want to question their wisdom. Which over here, how did we used to do, and how is it today? I propose that even some of the burnouts and so on are because of too many restrictions. Down here, the topics: social relations. Would we let everybody starve and sleep under the bridge if we didn't have the forced social redistribution? Of course not. Only voluntary social humanitarian love is moral. There is nothing moral about me giving money to the highway robber even when he says it's for his dying grandmother. Huh? And it dehumanizes donors and recipients. There here we have the production and consumption regulations and prohibitions. Mary will talk about that. It's just deadly. It's just deadly on a huge scale. While as the market would, of course, provide everything much, much better. I do want to show you one statistics which you're probably aware of. This is the incarceration rate in the United States. I think they have 25% of all the imprisoned people in the world are in America, and more than half of them are for drug-related issues. Tens of thousands of young people starting their career in the prison. And it has a zero effect on the price of the drugs. Quite the opposite. Here another one, paternalism, Federal Register, you probably know, 190,000 pages, just the federal rules and regulations. The index is 1,200 pages, and the tax, the index is 1,200 pages. The tax law, the American tax law, 80,000 pages. There is no way anybody can fill out their tax without violating some of those rules. Okay, here we go. History. James yesterday emphasized how important it is that we realize what happened here. This is the Industrial Revolution. This is not, as Marx and all of our Marxist teachers from kindergarten up to university even today say, this is the moment of the impoverishment of the world and humanity. It's not. It's not. It's the exact opposite. Here we have the normal stages in humanity. It's a subsistence level. We have the private sector providing just enough to survive, and if the state sector would extend their share, it would kill people. That's the normal. That's the normal human condition. Here we have the Industrial Revolution, which I propose a private revolution in the private productive sector. And it was the precondition for what I call a political revolution, which is the expansion of the state. At first, during the expansion, it allowed the private sector still to increase, but at a certain point, we are, of course, at the point today where an increase in the state sector would just would impoverish people. So, the population. Here, 3 graphs also. I'm sorry I have to run through these numbers. You see here, population, at first in the Industrial Revolution, what happens if the wealth increases? Of course, people at first survive at the survival level, but they do survive. So you logically have a population growth kicking in at 1750, and then from 1800 on, the average income growing. It's logical. So they shouldn't be, and what they're crying about is those people here that are on the subsistence level at 1800 who would have died before then. So that's the nonsense that they're teaching us. Here we see the income growth is kicking in, and this is what I call the political revolution. You see here when the different countries started increasing their government share. The Hindenburg's Germany, of course, or Bismarck's Germany, of course, at first with the welfare state. Bismarck, incidentally, I think, said had a clear goal and purpose when he extended the German welfare state. He wanted to make the population dependent on the state. That was his explicit goal. England, 1920, only after 19, I mean, even as a colonial power with huge expenses, at 10%. The Americans at 10%, even in 1933, and the Japanese later on, of course. Okay, and this is just to show you England. I believe England, from personal observation, in the late 70s, they extended their regulation and their taxes to a point where you saw capital consumption and deterioration in the streets and in the airports and so on. Okay, this is just a different way of illustrating these dynamics, the wealth pie and dynamics of social forces. Private means creative and productive. It's this year's view. Huh? And over here we have the political, it's power over fellow men, which is, as a definition, parasitical on the pie. Huh? And then we have the neutral defensive forces, so that we can illustrate history with the little pie, pre-industrial, then the private revolution, the social, the political revolution, and now we are at the point where we are at the point of when we extend the commercial and the political sphere to above state growth limit. We will impoverish the society. I think we're definitely at the point. And then, if anybody needed the proof, I mean, you all know that. But it's really, we forget just how insane those experiments were, and how you could ever even mention socialism. I think this should be. It's like fascism. It's really amazing that it still gets uttered. We have two countries destroyed, same population, same history, everything exactly the same. Some of them try a bit more market than the others. After 20 years, they were amongst the richest in the world, and these here were imprisoned in the biggest high security prison the world has ever seen, to keep them from running away and visiting their relatives. Okay, 3 scenarios. Finally, I will give you future scenarios that will definitely cover, they will definitely arrive. Now we have either the situation that things remain as they are, they will deteriorate, or they will improve. One of them. Actually, we can deduct this one because things never stay the same. So the question is, will we move? Now, for me, of course, the number 2 is deterioration, and the number 1 is improvement. Will we move right or left? And how fast? Huh? What are the factors? This, apologize again that I have to run through the systematic. I think one of the factors is technology and wealth. On the positive side, for freedom, we have technology which always starts in the private sector, and which will take over a lot of government functions. Government is so incredibly unimaginably inefficient that the private market will take over, although the government stuff is tax financed, like education, like even security, probably medical supplies or medical treatment will be taken over privately. And what I mean with stumbling to liberty, it's an idea I got from my friend Stefan Kinsella. People do, not the expression, but the idea. People get used to the freedoms that technology allows them, for example, internet or Uber and other things, and they're not willing to give that up. And technology also will make IP obsolete. So we sort of stumble towards freedom, whether people are aware, whether people read Rand or not, we will still move in the right direction. On the negative side, of course, the state can always use those technologies to our disadvantage. On the political convictions, there is a law that you cannot run a country against the active opposition of the majority of the population. Or in other words, everybody in the long run gets the government they deserve. But on the positive side, I think hardcore socialism is dead. Rational ignorance in political matters, especially when you're well off and things go well, rational ignorance also prevents revolutions, positive and negative. So I think people will be conservative, and also wars. I don't believe people would go for wars. Can't imagine who I would pick up the rifle for to fight my neighbors. On the right-hand side, of course, the green socialist propaganda in education, culture, and propaganda, of course, is still there, although it didn't keep me from becoming an anarchist. We have historic opportunities as far as people go. In the end, it's always a couple people who are very like us, who are interested and who are active. That I can't read. That decide on which way we go. But I think we have a good chance that we have the knowledge should an opportunity arise. And this is unfortunately the most exciting thing I cannot get into because he's pushing me too hard. Now, what is our role? Things can only be realized that have been thought of before. So it is necessary and efficient that we do spread libertarian ideas, that we give the potential Mozart a piano to play on. But I think what's most exciting, Marxism was successful with its inhuman socialist utopia. We can be even more successful with the eminently human vision of a pure private property society. And I'm going to skip here the topic, of course, is minimal state or private property anarchy, and I'm going to leave these three suggestions on those who want to read themselves into those exciting theories. I do want to finish off with a quote. I have one more minute. Two more. Just right. Because it sums up my last two. These last three slides. Comes from Hayek's Socialism and Intellectuals. He says there at the end, we must make the building of a free society once more an intellectual adventure, a deed of courage. What we lack is a liberal utopia, a program which seems neither a mere defense of things as they are, nor a deluded kind of socialism, but a truly liberal radicalism, which does not spare the susceptibilities of the mighty, which is not too severely practical, and which does not confine itself to what appears today as politically possible. The main lesson which the truly liberal must learn from the success of the socialists is that it was the courage to be utopian which gained them the support of the intellectuals, and therefore influence on public opinion, which is daily making possible what only recently seemed utterly remote. Unless we can make the philosophic foundations of a free society once more a living intellectual issue, and its implementation a task which challenges the ingenuity and imagination of the liveliest minds, the prospects of freedom are indeed dark. But if we can regain that belief in the power of ideas, which was the hallmark of liberalism at its best, the battle is not lost.